Hey everybody, good morning. Welcome in. Just going live. Here, Nathan West, Pharaoh slash GeoSlam. We'll let some people roll in. Thank you for joining. Just got the alert on my phone, so we'll wait a minute or two before we start. If anybody has any questions throughout, make sure to put them in the comment section, and we will get them answered. So, good morning, Nathan. How are you doing?
I'm doing well on this rainy Colorado day.
Uh,
Yeah. How are you, David?
I'm in Seattle and it's sunny and 75. Couldn't even be a better day.
What's
So
up with that? Traded weather for the day.
funny, funny how life works. So sure we'll see some people roll in. We'll give it till let's say three after, and we'll have some fun. So
Sounds good.
I see some people coming in. Looks like Mr. John's here. Hi John, how you doing today?
Listening in from Hawaii. Nice.
Wow. Really good early morning to you, Tyler. Maybe we should have started this a little later for you. Glad you're awake. Glad you're here.
And so I'm going to assume that most of the people here are going to be new to Slam, with a few people that are familiar with Slam. Hopefully we have a good spread.
I think it'll be a little bit of everything. Look forward to it. So we'll give it about 30 more seconds and
We'll jump right in. See if I can get this arranged so I can see the chat as I'm driving. There we go.
we got somebody all the way in Kenya. Look at that. Sarasota, Florida, Nevada, all around the world. That's pretty cool. Thanks for
Very cool.
sharing. Anybody else? Brian Hunt, all the way up in Alaska. Nice to see you, Brian. Thanks for riding in. And see there anybody else in a unique spot? We'd love to hear where you're coming from. And I think let's start. So I'm David Moss. I'm with Moss Geospatial, distributor Slam, other kind of survey equipment. I have with me today Nathan West, GeoSlam. Not going to be pitching any products to anything, but just to listen to learn on how the SLAM technology from any manufacturer can help help your workflows. I'm going there. There's a lot of unique things. There's a lot of people that are doing drone LiDAR. There's a lot of autonomy LiDAR on vehicles. Robot robots and warehouses, that sort of thing. So we're going to be focusing on kind of the 3D mapping world. There's a lot of mapping going on. Maybe you're not doing mapping quite yet, but this could be beneficial to a lot of people that you may not be aware about. So good morning, Nathan, and here's the floor for you.
Right. So we're talking about SLAM. So what is SLAM? It's an acronym. It is simultaneous localization and mapping. So it's figuring out where the sensor is in space at the same time that it's mapping the space around it. So it's pretty complex. There's really, really complex algorithms running in the background that kind of tie all this data together. So for this to work, it's normally a set of sensors. You'll have either a LiDAR sensor tied up to an IMU, or you'll have like a series of photos, because there's different types of SLAM, but we're focusing on the LiDAR. So with the LiDAR, like I said, you have a LiDAR sensor and you have the IMU working together. So the IMU is figuring out where it is in space, and the LiDAR sensor is mapping that space around it. And they're kind of working together to do both. So it works mostly off of best estimates. Initially, like as it's doing the live SLAM, it's working off best estimates. The LiDAR sensor is seeing how far away a feature is, and the IMU is kind of double checking that. It's saying, yes, I feel like we've moved forward, at the same time as the LiDAR sensor says, I'm now 7 feet closer to a feature. Almost all SLAM works on features. So it's something that's like a meter by a meter, can be smaller, but it's something that stands out from the surrounding environment. So it could just be a super reflective target. It doesn't necessarily have to be a 3-dimensional feature. It just has to be something that it can see that's relatively large. So a highly reflective panel will work, or something like a cardboard box, a car, anything that has mass to it, right, can be considered a feature. And that's what SLAM works on. So it has to be able to see these features because that's what it's kind of mapping, right? It has to be able to see the environment, and if the environment all looks the same, it's going to have difficulties. So that's where this best estimate kind of comes in, and these two sensors working together all works off of features and the IMU together. So it goes back to the 1980s and 1990s. A lot of it was in mining because you don't have GPS to help you kind of navigate in mines. So they have a lot of features, though, lots of rocks and things jutting out of the walls. So that's where SLAM initially got its start. It's really, really handy for just understanding a space around you instead of measuring every little like wall, corridor, any kind of, again, feature. It automatically maps all that because that's how it knows where it is in space. And a lot of this is broken down into voxels, which we'll get into. There's many different types of SLAM: graph SLAM, EFK, fast, topological, but we're focused on 3D LiDAR. We'll talk a little bit about visual as well. So all these, again, they work on features. Like EFK works on actual monuments, like land monuments. So it works on very, very large features, where the 3D LiDAR and visual can work on smaller, much smaller features. So it's much better for like indoor kind of environments, underground. Has a lot of applications when you really start to think about it. So Visual SLAM uses, like it says, either video or photo to figure out where it is. Most of the time video for doing the live because it's simultaneous. But it can use like a series of photos. If it's constantly taking photos, it can do the same thing. So it just takes features in the environment and figures out where it is in respect to those features. That's the whole basis of SLAM. So LiDAR, instead of using photos or video and trying to figure out 3D topological features just from that, it uses LiDAR, which is a little bit, actually much more accurate. And LiDAR is a sensor that sends out little light pulses, and then it measures the return of that light pulse. So by measuring the timing, it can tell the difference, or the distance, of whatever it hit. It can tell the distance between where the sensor is and what it just hit. And it also measures the strength of the return, because something that's white will reflect light very easily. Something that is black will absorb a lot of that light and reflect only a little bit of it. So using that information, you can tell a lot of data about your environment. So it's measuring distance and reflectance. And using those two things, it can find features. Again, that's what all SLAM works on. I'm going to repeat that a lot because it's very important to understand whenever you're working with SLAM or thinking about SLAM, that it's all about features. So LiDAR works off of these pulses, finding features. The visual works off of photos or video to find features. And just because of the nature of the beast, the LiDAR is going to be more accurate at measuring those light pulses. Certain sensors can be accurate to a millimeter or better. Very, very handy, depending on your circumstances. One's going to be better than the other. So this has pretty much changed mapping, as you can imagine. Instead of using a measuring tape or even a laser disto, the little pocket thing that'll tell you like a one distance, Instead of that, it maps the whole environment all at once as you're moving through it. It's somewhat like the terrestrial LiDAR. Put it on a tripod, it'll scan a room. You move the tripod over so it gets the other side of a beam or column. You have it do another scan. Instead of constantly picking up the tripod and moving it, you are the tripod and you just move with it. So it's very fast collection of data, and it's fairly accurate, down to 2 centimeter. Most every SLAM is going to be around the 2 centimeter mark. There are methods to kind of tighten that up, but it's about universal to be about 2 centimeter.
So what kind of people are using SLAM out there? You mentioned mining, you mentioned people with distos, so some architects, some AEC. What are some other people that you experience out there with the use cases of SLAM with LiDAR?
Construction, because we're so quickly measuring a space, people in construction are using it to keep up with the volumes that are being used or just the basic construction that's going up, because you can do a scan one week, come back the next, do another scan, and do a comparison to see if the walls that were supposed to go up have been put up, if the ground leveling has been done like it's supposed to, if they've moved the volume that they said they moved. There's a few different applications just in construction. There's survey. We have a lot of people that are doing manholes, because you have to measure all the pipes that are coming into a manhole to make sure everything's the way that it's supposed to be, that it's mapped properly with the city. Instead of using a stick and measuring each of those and measuring how far down they are and the width, you can just use a SLAM LiDAR or visual SLAM even, and you just stick it down into that manhole, it maps it real quickly, you pull it back out, you're on to your next manhole, instead of spending 10 minutes per. So there's a lot of applications for this. Anyone that's trying to measure something, you can most likely use SLAM. A lot of applications. So mostly what it's done is sped up a lot of this process. That's how mapping has changed. It's now much more accurate and much faster. It's just very, very handy. I have a background in survey, so I've had to do some of these surveys of houses that have already been built, and it can be very tedious. It feels very tedious. Where this this just speeds it up, makes it much simpler, and you can take any of the measurements that you need at any time because you have all the data sitting in your computer. So the field time is greatly lowered. So what's the right SLAM for you? Like I said, if you're trying to get highly accurate 3D map, you get the best results with LiDAR. If you're wanting computer vision, unmanned robots, then visual SLAM is going to be more likely what you're wanting, because that's going to be real time. Like it's a system that needs the data in real time so that it can act in real time. Where with 3D or the 3D LiDAR SLAM, you're getting the data in real time, but you're capturing that data for later use. So there's a use for each and a place for each. And of course, they're not all created equal. Some people have been running SLAM for years and years and years, and so they've put it through its paces, and it can figure out some really complex environments. And there's some newer SLAMs that they're still kind of figuring it out, so they need simpler environments for them to function properly. So like in a mine, you want a really complex SLAM because there's really complex things going on. If you're just doing an office building, a simple SLAM will work for you because it's all planes, simple objects. It's much easier for it to figure everything out.
And some people out there, they have rented SLAM from other places. They're not able to innovate it. They source it from other places. So there's a lot of things to consider. Somebody just wrote in, what kind of SLAM does the spot the dog use?
That's going to be the visual, most likely. They kind of make it pretty versatile. You can hook up a couple different things to it, but it's going to be visual for the most part because it can just tell where it's at. But again, I've seen where they put a regular LiDAR puck on there and it gets around just fine. But for any kind of automated system, the visual is going to work better for you.
And you have the remote controller sort of, running the RC car on the spot too. You got 360 imagery.
Mm-hmm. And that's going to be more likely.
So you mentioned some of the common ways. There's some unique ways. Maybe you touch on too. Don't have there. So you mentioned people put them down in manholes. Kind of with that, people. You and I have both heard of people putting down mine shafts. What are the kind of unique use cases have you
Well, someone
seen out
just asked about tree survey. That is one of our use cases because it's a lot easier just to walk around a tree, pointing a LiDAR at it, and it will map everything that it can reach. It's little bitty light points, so it can get through a lot of foliage, unless it's really, really dense foliage. Is if you can see, it'll get a light beam in there and catch that return, and it'll measure it. So instead of sending a team of people up redwoods to measure the mass of a redwood, you can just walk around it, capture it all. We have people doing whole forests, capturing whole forests. So then you can cut it about chest height, and you can start measuring tree trunk diameter at chest height, and you can get a really good idea of what's going on in your forest. So some pretty interesting things that people are doing with this.
So what are some of the common ways the ways most people are?
Well, as I
using
said, there's handheld, pretty handy dandy. You just walk around with it. It maps whatever you see because it's line of sight.
That's probably the most common from.
Yeah, very common. We have wearables, backpacks. It's a little bit easier than holding a unit in your hand. Your shoulder will wear out eventually. So it's kind of nice to have it up on a backpack. But that does make it harder to get through doorways. You can't get into smaller spaces. So there's a give and a take with that. It's definitely easier to get around, but harder to get into spaces. Then we can mount them on UAVs, of course. There's a few different options, and they're all pretty good. There are specific LiDAR units that are made for drones, and those are a little bit different. Some of them that you see here are made for handheld, so they're not the apex of drone LiDAR, but they are very, very flexible, and you can get good data, even mounting them on a drone.
Because most drone LiDAR you need GPS. If you don't have GPS, you don't have anything. So you could theoretically use these in mines or underneath the tree canopy or anywhere you'd want to take it. That's kind of the beauty of the SLAM as well. You don't need GPS anywhere you use it. You can tie it into any control that you want. There's a lot of systems out there that do that, but it's not a necessity to get that accuracy.
Yeah, as long as you can close the loop, because we like to start and end the scan in the same spot. Most every SLAM does, because that's like closing a survey loop. You're going to correct for drift. Any kind of error is going to be corrected by doing that closing of a loop. So doing a long linear one and coming straight back to it, you could introduce some drift, and it would be good to have control. That will improve the quality of the scan in that case. But if you're doing a nice big loop with your scan, then you're going to be just fine. You don't necessarily need any control because, again, this all got its start down in mines. And they need to be really, really accurate down there so that they're building their columns correctly so that they don't have any kind of cave-ins. So they really heavily rely on this to be accurate without control. So it's pretty darn accurate without control in the first place. But again, there are some circumstances where you may want to introduce control. But
What will some of those be?
Again, like a long linear one, if you're doing just one tunnel and you don't have any control up top side and you're just all underground in one straight line, you do want to have some control if you can, because you can introduce some kind of drift in there. So linear ones and
you want overlapping data too. That's not a bad thing with this sort of.
yeah, you definitely do. That's kind of the whole point of starting and stopping in the same spot is you're going to have at least that one point of overlapping data. It can help correct for drift. But the more kind of little loops you do, like if you're doing an office building, come back to that central hallway as much as you can, because every time you do, it's going to check back into itself and correct. If you're doing like a forest, say, do some figure eights in that forest. Come back and do figure eights. And those little loops, again, will help it check back into itself and correct for any kind of error.
That makes it easier to merge it as well. If you start in the middle of a big warehouse or a big office building, that anytime you can get all those overlapping bits, if you're doing 5, 6, 7, 8 scans, you can, that'd have to be, one big of a hell of a big building, but more of that data together, you can help you out.
And there's a question about the UAVs that GeoSLAM is compatible with. It's entirely dependent on the payload capacity of the UAV. I think it's somewhere around 5.5 pounds is the lightest that we can make our system. So as long as the UAV can lift 5.5 pounds or more, then we can have a mount made for it if we don't already. We have a handful of mounts already kind of made, but
So
again, it's all about payload.
Matrice 300, the new Matrice 350. This one pictured is a Whisper Systems, made in USA, NDAA. But free fly. What is that? The Alta,
Mm-hmm.
and M600, DJI. I mean, like Nathan said, anything that can support its 5.5 pound weight is you could definitely carry. We got some other questions too, and kind of our next slide. We'll move to that. Nathan, if anybody has any questions, we can keep going, keep talking. We have this scheduled for an hour. We're only 20 minutes in, but next question about how does SLAM compare to SFM photogrammetry?
I know as it compares to photogrammetry, in most cases, it's going to be a lot more accurate, and it's also a lot faster to process. Photogrammetry takes hours, even if you have a really, really nice computer. It can take hours for a larger project, where the LiDAR, it's almost building the point cloud already, so you don't have to rebuild the point cloud. It's it's capturing points of light that gets reflected to it. So it easily builds a point cloud. So the processing speed's much faster. The accuracy in almost all cases is going to be better. You're going to have higher accuracy with LiDAR. But photogrammetry, you can capture more complex objects with it, just because it works off of the photos and the algorithms that run behind it. You can get some really complex, far away places with some accuracy. So it's a give and a take in some cases. But in most cases, the LiDAR is going to be better. Can the SLAM LiDAR be easily combined with LiDAR data gathered via UAS? Easily. They're both point clouds. There's a lot of different pieces of software that will take point clouds from different sources, and it can mesh them. It can bring them together, form them into one. There was a question about long pipes.
Yeah, right here, Jeff.
It's really, really good for GPS denied environments. If it doesn't have a lot of features, SLAM can suffer, but you can introduce features in that kind of an environment, like place a cardboard box every 100 feet down the pipe. Anything like that, like introduce features periodically through there so that it can reach out and grab that feature, move on to the next one to reach out and grab it. And also, I would try and have some kind of control. Like if it's maybe up top, like you start up top, hit a control, go into the pipe, go all the way to the other end where you can pop back up and hit another control. And that'll help with any kind of drift, because long pipes, you're going to introduce some drift.
So here's another question.
Taking reference points or control points along with the start and end point improve the quality of scan. In most cases, it won't improve the quality because it's going to be extremely high quality just from the start. Because that's the whole point of SLAM, is that it's creating 2-scale environments and models of what it sees. So it's already going to be highly, highly accurate, unless you're in a certain case where you cannot come back to your stop area. Then you're going to want to introduce some control just to increase the quality, because your quality is going to drop if you can't close that loop. So again, that's for pipes, for, I don't know, really long extended scans that you're going to do that you just can't come back to the beginning. Have some control in there just to make sure everything's nice and tight, because it can't do its natural fix. So you do want some control in those cases.
So let's see, that gentleman had another question as well.
For building scans, if we have more overlapping scans, adding control points doesn't bring a roll, or it does improve the accuracy. So there's a couple different ways of combining scans. So if you have overlapping scans, you can take that overlap and you can manually align it. You can find a stairwell, a curb line, something that's common in those two scans, and you can bring them close together and tell the program to do a fine alignment. There's a lot of different softwares that will do that. But if you do have control points and they share control points, then it's a little more automatic. You don't necessarily have to do the manual. You can just tell it, hey, these are shared control points, bring those together and fine align the rest. And again, there's a lot of softwares that will do that. So you just got to figure out, if you're in forestry, there's one that will work better. If you're in construction, there's another that will work better. So you just, whatever kind of environment that you're scanning, there's.
We have another one that's not, I can't pull up, but it says, how easy is it to sync the point cloud generated into a VR environment?
Ooh.
I know people are doing for video games, but
that's going to require modeling. So the point cloud isn't necessarily a model. It's just a series of points that have like XYZ assigned to them, right?
it's more like 80-90% of the skeleton of the model.
Yeah. Yeah, but there's no actual surface. Like a hard surface isn't anywhere in there. And VR pretty much works on hard surfaces. Like they're hard, solid 3D models. So
you want to maybe talk a little bit more about the point clouds itself and how people use this BIM, CAD modeling, all that?
yeah, so the point cloud, like I said, is just a series of points. They're not a CAD model. They're not a VR model. It's just a series of points. So you take it and you put it into a piece of software like AutoCAD or something, and you essentially start drawing or modeling on top of it. It just shows you where the features are. It shows you where the wall is, where that tree is. So you have to go in and tell the computer, this is a tree, this is a wall. And then that's how you start building it, is you're telling the computer what these points actually represent. Because it doesn't know, this tree shape that you see and you know is a tree. It doesn't recognize that as a tree. It just recognizes that as, 10,000 points that have these, coordinates.
So we got a couple more.
So point cloud's really good for taking measurements because you know what it is. You can take measurements. And it's also good for building models, but it's for building models. It's not a model itself. So you definitely have to go in and do the tedious work of assigning the surfaces, the labels, and all that. Spanning 2D LiDAR versus continuous scanning 3D LiDAR. Spinning 2D LiDAR will get you floor plans because you're pretty much taking a slice. You're only measuring everything on this one plane, right? So you can use that to make floor plans. If you can get really creative with it, maybe do like the forestry thing, like I said, just hold it at chest height and walk around, and you'll get like a series of circles in a field. And those circles are tree trunks, I guess. So 3D LiDAR is, instead of a 2D plane, you're capturing all of it, getting all the data that you can see instead of just off of this one slice. So 2Ds can be useful, but 3D is way more useful. You're capturing way more data.
So if you have more questions, Jeff, or answered it, please keep on writing in. And then Ryan noted you can definitely mesh the point clouds. Use that in the VR. We got another question from Melvin.
Is there a way to tell a client how accurate the data is? Total station have angles and distance specs, so pretty straightforward. But adding SLAM sounds like it is pretty difficult to be consistent. It depends on the person doing the scanning, the environment, the type of sensors that you're using. There's a lot of factors that go into it. So it can be hard to be consistent. It's almost like using the GPS in surveying. But anyone can go out, use that rod, use that GNSS, and tell you that this point is right here. But it takes a skilled surveyor, good equipment, and just knowledge of the environment as well, for someone to be able to accurately find a point, even using GPS survey equipment. And so SLAM is a lot the same way. There's a few different factors that go into it, and the only way to like really solidify with a client that it's good data is to show them, like take them out and say, all right, I measured this and I can measure it in real life, and I can show you what it says in my computer, and they match. And I can assure you that they match across this whole spread. And so you have to learn it yourself, be confident in it yourself, know that you're doing the right processes, know that you're using good equipment, and understand the environments that you're going to be going into ahead of time. And you can be confident in this, that you can do live measurements with your customer and be spot on every time. So it's kind of a combination of things. You have to build that confidence. Like everyone's very confident in the GPS surveying now because they kind of understand that it's a few different factors. And if you can trust those factors, you can trust the data. You can combine geoslam scans and drone images of a building. How can I merge both in a single coordinate system? At geoslam, we don't necessarily have that technology yet. We have a camera that mounts to our scanner unit that can be taken around, and it will automatically locate those photos inside the environment. But we don't have the capability of doing that with a drone camera quite yet.
I mean, is there ways to mesh photogrammetry point clouds and SLAM point clouds though? Is there?
You can mesh those. And so if you have those meshed and you can position those in the photogrammetry cloud, then you can position those in the SLAM cloud as well.
That's pretty easy to do. And then we got another question.
With ArcGIS, we have quite a few customers using GeoSLAM with ArcGIS indoors. I know there's a lot of people using a lot of different types of SLAM along with ArcGIS, so it's very easy to combine those pieces of data. And just before that one, someone was saying that they think it seems like there's a lot of training that's needed.
That was the person that asked about the total station, the same one that. No.
Yeah, I just want to say that's a yes and no. Running the scanner is pretty easy. Once you kind of learn these best practices, it's about 30 minutes of training. But after that, it's just using it in a couple of different environments, because the experience of it is way more than someone just sitting there telling you like, all right, you're in a cave, this is what you do. You just have to go in that cave, do a scan, look at the results, and you're like, okay, I see where I messed up here. And it's a little bit of trial and error, but it's pretty quick.
Say it's easier to wrap your head around than a total station and some other
very much so. Yeah, much easier than a total station. Oh my god, so much easier. Collecting SLAM data in dark environments. Are black backgrounds challenging for returns? They have to be extremely dark for it to be challenging, because it's sending out a really strong pulse, and it can measure a really weak one coming back. So it's pretty good in with the black backgrounds. For dark environments, the sensor is creating its own light. It's projecting its own light source and measuring the return. So dark environments are just fine, at least for the LiDAR SLAM. There's like the visual SLAMs and stuff like that. Dark environments, definitely mess with those. But with LiDAR, because we're producing our own light, it doesn't mess with it at all.
Yeah, you could be in the pitch black, open up a dark closet, scan it just as well as the main hallway. You could put it on a drone at night even, capture still that way. No problems. Of course, you wouldn't have any colorization or anything from any system you're using. But so we got a follow-up from Jeff as well. He was the one that mentioned about the 2D LiDAR versus 3D. Here's his new question.
Yeah. The spinning Velodyne 2D versus fixed position Ouster 3D. Well, essentially in that fixed position Ouster, there is a thing that is spinning. So it's about the same, just one's more contained. One's all contained, where the other one's relying on that spinning mirror. And different scanners do have different accuracies, very much so. It's pretty much the LiDAR sensor that's inside there is a lot of the accuracy. And then if they're doing SLAM, there's a SLAM accuracy. So the sensor accuracy will give you great local. So like measuring a doorway, measuring a window, that'll be really, really tight to exactly what that sensor's specification is. But across the project, like from one end of a building to the other end of the building, that's more of a global SLAM. That's working on the algorithm in the background, and it's relying on that for its accuracy. So the sensors can be really, really high grade in some of those and get really tight accuracies in the local, but across the project, they can really kind of lose themselves if their SLAM isn't really nice and tight.
Yeah, it's all about the SLAM. There's pretty much everybody using the same 4 or 5 different sensors, but
Mhm.
it's all about making sure you have a robust process. So Steve kind of has a question similar to that, minimum maximum distance. That would just depend on your sensor itself. So you have stuff that are 20, 30 meters of range, stuff that are 100 meters, a couple things that are up to, 300 meters. The longer the range is, the more kind of just natural loss of accuracy you have from distance. But, you know, general, would you say half a meter to a couple hundred would be kind of the range, Nathan, or what would you?
Yeah. I'd say the minimum would be about 2 to 3 feet, because below that, most sensors, the return is too fast. It can't accurately measure that. So 2 to 3 feet is your minimum. And then the maximum, it kind of varies by sensor. Again, 30 meters to about, I think some have 150, 200. You do start losing a little bit of accuracy once you start going beyond 100, like 70 meters, about that. You start losing a little bit of accuracy. But one of the cool things is with SLAM is that most of the time you're walking up on that object, so it can do that correction as you get closer to most of those objects.
So we got another one. How does it SLAM do or LiDAR do with Windows?
LiDAR is working off of, you know, light reflections. And so windows are very reflective. They can almost be like a mirror. You can get some weird effects off of mirrors using LiDAR. Photogrammetry is a lot the same. So visual SLAM, they'll have the same issues. We can kind of get around that using some of our filters. I'm sure most collection devices, the software that comes with them will have a little bit of a filter that you can filter some of that out with. GeoSlam itself has a transient filter that we'll use, and that'll actually get rid of some of those reflections in the mirror because it sees those almost as moving objects. So there's a few different ways of getting around it, but it does kind of mess with it. Then errors and attic scans with drifts. So I'm gonna go out on a limb. I'm pretty sure I'm right here that it's because it's going through a small space. When you go up into an attic, you're mostly going through like a little hole in the floor or something like that. And a lot of people, a lot of companies, their SLAM doesn't do well with transitions. So it's transitioning from one environment to another because it all works on features, right? If you're going through a small opening, you're introducing a whole bunch of brand new features to it, and you're losing all the old features that it kind of uses to orient itself. So if it can't orient itself to those old features and it has a whole bunch of new ones, it can't quite figure out where it's at because, it's all new. Where's my old stuff? I don't know. So at least in GeoSlam, we've worked really, really hard with kind of correcting for that transitioning to environments. Something that you can do is make sure that whatever sensor you're using can see the old stuff as well as the new stuff at the same time. So when you're going through that attic, make sure it sees down as well as up. And then you go through it, and then it's all new features, and then you can move through it, go to the end, come back, and do the same thing as you go back down. Make sure it sees all this new stuff and some of the stuff through the floor as you move through, because it works on features. Make sure it can see all the features it can. Don't surprise it with a bunch of new, and that should fix that drift. Time or distance restrictions with SLAM. Can you scan all day in a 1 kilometer cave? Do you need some control points in the cave first? You don't necessarily need control points in the cave. If it's a really long linear one, of course, you can introduce drift because it's long and linear. But if you have multiple ways of coming back to where you started, different routes you can take, it will stay accurate. And as far as time, it's For our particular product, GeoSlam, we say about 20 minutes per scan. We've had someone do an hour and a half long scan, and it came out just fine. All the data was good, but the processing time goes up exponentially when you do something like that. So it's more about processing time as
And
it is.
your hardware requirements go up
Yeah.
exponentially as well.
So if you have a really screaming machine and you have a lot of time to sit there and watch it, then you can do an hour-long scan. And so the distance that you can go in an hour, like a kilometer cave, you can probably do a kilometer cave in one scan if you're really, really pushing it. But yeah, it should work. Excuse me. Scanning is easier than processing the data, very much so. Scanning is pretty much the easy part. You just hold it steady and walk around, show it everything you need mapped, it'll map it. So once you process, you drag and drop it into your computer. The computer will sit there and process it for about the same time, maybe double the time that you scanned, depending on what product you're using. And then you have all this data. So what are you going to do with all that data? That's way more complex than just simply capturing it. Because capturing it, you're walking around. Now that you have it, what do you do with it? So it can be very tedious and complicated depending on what you're trying to do with all that data. So is that true for transitioning into manhole, into large vault with large control, with ground control topside? Yeah, you do want to do that transition slowly. Whenever you're putting it through the actual ring of the manhole, go slow. Make sure it can see stuff down there while it still sees you, while it still sees like the light pole behind you and all that. And then once it kind of sees the stuff in there and you for a good second, then you can transition it fully in, and it will keep everything the way that it's supposed to be, and it won't introduce drift. It's just slow, measured, make sure it can see everything. It all works on features. And the average processing time for 20 minutes, it kind of depends on the complexity of the environment. A 20-minute scan of an open, empty warehouse, you can process that through probably in like 5 minutes if you have a decent machine, a decent computer with decent hardware. If it's a really complex 20-minute scan, you were going down into a tunnel, coming up into like a museum with a bunch of just stuff everywhere, objects everywhere. That one's going to take probably maybe tops twice that. It could take 40 minutes if you have, just a decent machine. It's not incredible. It's not a screamer. That'll take maybe 40 minutes. So we like to say anywhere from the same amount of time that you took the scan to about double. And it all depends on complexity and the type of computer you have.
And then there's some more time onto that too if you want to colorize a scan if your system has a camera built in from any manufacturer you're using.
Yeah, if you're doing filtering, feature extractions, anything like that, that's all going to take extra time. But simply to just create a point cloud, it can be pretty fast. It can be.
So we still got some time. We're waiting. We need some more questions from you all. We still have at least another 15 minutes for you guys. So if anybody has anything else, you can go on there. If you enjoyed this kind of session, we're having a more longer, extended version with myself, two other gentlemen, Leo of Inertial Labs, and Connor Ferguson of Whisper Systems. We'll be going all through the ins and outs of drone LiDARs. In areas that you do have GPS, areas that you're able to fly. There's some advantages and disadvantages of that. Here's another comment from Melvin, though.
Yeah, some companies taking about 9 hours of cloud processing. And that's cloud processing. I've heard tell that some of these people are just sending it over to other nations or some kind of like cubicle farm where they just have a bunch of people working on point clouds. And so it's not actually like a process that's being done. It's a human that's in there picking everything out, making sure everything runs correctly, changing the parameters to make it do right. So that's why it takes 9 hours, because there's another person on the other end working with it.
It's not AI. It's somebody downloading it, processing it locally, and then re-uploading it.
Yeah. And so Most scanners that you're not sending it to the cloud, they're going to be faster just because it's all running on your computer. And scanners are definitely faster than total stations. Yeah, it takes a while to get a total station set up to start taking points, whereas scanners very, very quick to get set up, and you're taking 300,000 points a second or more.
And we got
Is there
Mr.
a
Scott.
recommended? Yeah, Scott Hayes is asking if there's a recommended yearly calibration for the units. It depends on which one you're asking about. For GeoSlam itself, it depends on how much you're using it. I've had a demo unit that I take out. I take it to the airport all the time, and it hasn't needed a calibration in a couple of years. It's all just fine. But if you're taking them into really dusty environments, if you're bringing them around, they're definitely getting dropped every once in a while. Then we would recommend a yearly calibration where you send it back to the manufacturer. They take a look at everything. But for the most part, they're very robust units. They can go up to 5 years without needing calibration. And we have a warranty for 3 years, at least the GeoSlam. And most of them do have a few-year warranty. And they just talk to them. But most of the time, calibrations aren't that necessary.
So you have to give me a call, Scott. We'll talk a little bit more about that, and hope your arm is doing well. Just hope to see you soon. So another nice comment from Melvin.
Yeah, with the cloud processing. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much all the clouds out there. There's only, I can't think of the software, but one or two that are actually doing, AI extractions and some of the actual, post-processing work that's done. But pretty much as an industry whole, if you see something that's, cloud processing, that's being sent out. So another comment from Claudia as well. So, nearly 200 apartments in 4 days with a mobile scanner. That's pretty impressive. What kind of scanner were you using? Love to hear what you're using and where you're from. And this is cool. We've had people all around the world, Nathan.
Yeah, quite nice. Hopefully, we've gotten them some good information and they can get some projects off the ground that they weren't sure about. That'd be cool.
So she's waiting on you again. If you have any questions for us, if you want to scan this QR code, type in the link here, goes to the same destination. You can leave your information there. You can contact us directly. We're more than happy to help you one-on-one. Sometimes it's don't want to share on this public forum, and we understand. There's ways to do that around there as well. And if you're interested, again, on the 21st, myself, Leo of Inertial Labs, Connor of Whisper Systems are going to be going in and out. It's probably be more of a 90-minute, 2-hour session, and we're happy to help you there. So that'll be the next installment. The link on the QR code will get you a direct link there. If you're connected with me on LinkedIn, I just posted about it just on my page. Looks like Claudia said use BLK to go. And here's Brian again. He was the one that asked the question about ArcGIS earlier.
Advancements in using synthetic data to train AI deep learning models, one of the current bottlenecks. Yeah. There are some really great advancements in AI. I'm really hoping that they just take off because that feature extraction, just building models and telling it where the wall is so tedious. So getting AI, that'd be really cool.
Another GeoSlam user with a cool comment. So
very cool. 165 apartments in 25 minutes. Moving pretty quick with the Zeb Horizon. The Zeb Horizon does have a little bit of a range advantage on the BLK to go. And some of these, the SLAM algorithms don't like if you turn the instrument sideways or upside down.
Yeah, you can't put it in a manhole or put
Yeah.
it over a ledge or.
The GeoSlam products, and I think the Emison product as well, is okay with being turned upside down, sideways. They're a little more flexible in their algorithm.
I wonder what a Navis would do if you turned it upside down.
I've seen where you can turn them sideways. You can capture wall points, but I don't think they can be turned upside down yet.
Here's another great question. Melvin, we appreciate your involvement. Great questions.
Yeah, combining a SLAM system with tripod-based. Of course, we have a lot of people doing this. There's some military they do scans, and they need some really, really tight scans in some areas, but the thing that they're scanning is just massive. So they use ours to do everything except for these really tight areas, and they bring in a terrestrial tripod laser scanner, scan that for the really, really tight tolerances, and then they just combine the two. And again, there's a few different cloud softwares that will combine point clouds, so it's not too complicated.
And then Liam said, do you have any AI software? Nothing that I'd feel confident recommending that I've seen fully results. I know more and more are coming out there.
Yeah.
So I know the big kind of trade shows, these companies probably have booths, commercial UAV, September in Vegas, October, there's the huge worldwide Energio. In Germany, with Reality Capture Network show in October, the week after in Boise. We just had Exponential, which is about this time of the year, in Denver. Denver every year, and Geo Week in February, early March. So it's kind of the big shows. If you want to learn more about those, of course, you can always Google and stuff. But those are all I always see those kind of shows. So
Yeah.
But sorry, I don't have a recommendation for you, and I don't think you do either.
Nathan. No, there's one that I saw last week, but I'm not sure how much prompting they had done, like how many things they'd already kind of identified training it, because it was going through and just labeling everything super, super fast, and it looked great, it looked amazing, but it looked too good. And GeoInt next week in St. Louis. Yeah, GeoAI entrance there. That'd be cool.
I don't think I've heard of that show, but
I really like to see what these people are coming out with, because it's almost week by week they come out with something cooler and better. So yeah. I'm very interested, because again, all that tedious work we can capture. Once you've captured it, you have to go through all the tedious stuff of labeling everything, building that model. It's ridiculous.
Looks like there's that symposium here. Maps to Metaverse. 4,000 people. Interesting. Let's look at some of the
DoD military mapping, cutting edge stuff will be there. Well, I'm excited.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I haven't heard of this show.
That'll be cool.
See if I can, oh yeah, Lockheed and Esri's there, got a big booth.
All right. That's the point of doing these, is to kind of get everyone together and working together. Sharing information.
Interesting. Thanks for saying that. You wrote there, DoD, mapping military, heavy AI, rendered AI. Are you going to be there, Bryant? Sounds like a cool show. So,
well, if there's no more questions, everybody.
Yeah, we'll give it another minute or two, but we appreciate your time. Been really good. Thank you all. And again, if you like this installment of our series, we're going to have the new one on drone LiDAR. You can find that on LinkedIn. On there, looks like we got a comment. Session come a long ways. Yeah, the aerial LiDAR 2 as well. Claudius has had some experience doing a train track. I don't think I've scanned a train track, but that sounds like a lot of fun. Sounds cool. Especially if you did something like the locate setup, you cover a lot of ground like that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I could see like doing the train tracks and then you go into a big station. That'd be a cool set.
So mounting one to a train or to a car as it's moving slowly down, just mount it to the car. That'd be cool. I bet they are easy to draw, just a bunch of straight lines.
That'd be very cool. So again, you can scan that QR code as well. We'll give it another minute or two if anybody wants to add some more information. But great session. Thanks for your time, Nathan. A lot of fun always talking talking with you. Let me scan there. There's a way to contact Nathan and I both directly. If you have there, thanks for the kind words. Thank you for your nice questions as well. Glad you're enjoying your horizon wherever you're at. Have any questions again? Hesitate to ask. Appreciate that. And again, June 21st. Talking about drone LiDAR. So, and we're happy to help. So, but looks like no more questions. So, thank you all.
Thanks,
A lot of fun.
guys.
Thank you, Nathan. And we're here to help, here to answer all things SLAM. So, contact us again. We're more than willing to help. Thanks again, everybody. And we'll see you on June 21st for our next installment. See you then. Thanks, Nathan. Oh, you won. Talk
Bye.
to you all soon. Bye, everybody.